That's what
So
it
I
is.
started.
Fair enough.
Do you want?
Okay,
Wait, I started.
we'll just
something,
check now if it's live. It should be live.
and also if the sound works well.
Yeah.
And I'll just.
And then for the next year, we will study your setup carefully to improve ours.
Wait, just.
And then for the next year, you will
Wait,
cut out there.
wait.
Yeah.
Wait, I refreshed.
People are popping in and
Okay.
out. Things are happening. Things are
Yeah.
definitely happening.
So stream is working now, so you can start. We'll practice for the
Oh,
next year to
cool.
have
So
our
I'm-
setup as stable
I'm
as yours.
live. Hey, come on! You guys are in the middle of nowhere in an old cathedral, so I think it's going really well from what I can see. So I'm live. I can start. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Your sound is off. All right. Awesome. So, hello. Hi. My name is Aral, and I've been making things with computers for the last 4 decades or so. And for the past almost a decade, I've been doing so at Small Technology Foundation. So it's me and Laura. We're a 2-person, tiny little not-for-profit. And what we work on is small technology, which is everyday tools for everyday people designed to increase human welfare, not corporate profits. So that's what our goal is, right? We're not making things for corporations and then somehow magically thinking they'll trickle down to being useful things that protect human rights or anything. We're not doing that. We're not making enterprise software. We're trying to build everyday things for everyday people. And so that's what we do. And so what is small technology in terms of its characteristics, right? So everyday tools for everyday people. What kind of tools? Well, small technology tools are easy to use. They are personal. So again, they're not for corporate use. And they're private by default. So we don't make things, where it collects all this information about you, and then we say, but if you go into the settings and you set this setting and this setting in your preferences, and you set this and you set this and you set this, then we probably won't be gathering information about you or tracking you. I'm looking at you, Mozilla. It is, they're share alike, our licenses. So what we're trying to do is everything we make is free and open source under a share alike license, not a Creative Commons share alike. We use AGPL for our licenses because that's more fit for software. But the character is share alike. So if you take from the commons, you should give back to the commons. What's the opposite of this? Liberal licenses, right? Like MIT, etc., which are open source licenses. And businesses, big business loves open source, right? Because it is what conservatives do all over the world, right? They enclose the commons. They take something that people have given and openly shared, and then they go, well, I'm going to build this wall around it, right? So Microsoft says, I'm going to take this free thing, and then I'll spend a few $million on top of it, but all of that stuff that we build on top of it, that's proprietary, that's ours, right? So no, share alike. What we're building is peer-to-peer, and I'll talk a bit more about how we aim to get there as well. And of course, the technologies have to be interoperable so that there's no lock-in, so you don't have to be locked into us. And I'm especially paying a lot of attention to that in terms of all of the infrastructure that we're building. And that makes things take longer, but we're trying to make it so that we're not the only people, if we're offering something as a service, for example, in the future, that we won't be the only ones. We're actually spending time to make sure other people can host the things that we're making as well, so that there's no lock-in to us. Similar to private by default, what we make is zero knowledge whenever possible, so we don't gather any information to begin with, right? GDPR is great. The General Data Protection Regulation is great. It's better than nothing, but it only kicks in after data has been collected, right? So we need to take a few steps backwards and say, well, do we need to collect this data, right? If you are a people farmer or a surveillance capitalist, of course you do, because that's your business model. But we're not, so we don't need to. So we have to be very sure that we're not collecting anything we don't need, which basically means that we don't collect anything. And the stuff that we make is non-commercial. Now, that doesn't mean that going forward we won't be hosting services and where people pay to use them, etc., where we actually have costs within the capitalist system we live in. But it means that we are a not-for-profit, that our reason for existing is not to make a profit, is not to become billionaires. The technology we build, we try very strongly to ensure that it's non-colonial, and that's our approach in terms of design. So we're not saying we know best. I don't know best. I can only design for myself and for people like me and my own biases and my own background and my own privileges within that system. But I can make sure the things that I make can be adapted and modified and made fit for purpose by other groups, right? So this again ties into it being free and open source, but also into the approach to the community in terms of how we release those things, etc. And of course, small technology has to be inclusive, right? That is not just accessibility, but inclusivity in all of its various forms. So this all really kind of stems from, these are the small technology principles. These all stem from our earlier work with the Ethical Design Manifesto while we were known as INDIE. And the Ethical Design Manifesto, again, is very, very simple, right? It all comes down to respect. Respect for what? At its very core, respect for human rights, right? That's where you start. If the things you make do not respect human rights, then how can you say this is ethical? How can you say this is for the common good, right? Or for the greater good, or for good. So respect for human effort. So if the things we make are very difficult to use, or if we say to people, hey, you have to learn this and you have to learn that, and if you don't put in that effort to learn all of these things because we couldn't put in the effort to make it easier, then you don't deserve our tools. If that's a very, I mean, that's a horrible kind of approach, isn't it? But you see it quite often in free and open source, where we have these rites of passage. We say you must jump through these hoops in order to get here, like Arch Linux or whatever, right? You have to learn about partitioning a database, your disk drive before you actually get to, having an operating system that works. Okay, so yeah, we have to be really, aware of the fact that not everyone spends all of their time building technology or playing with technology. Some people actually just use technology, right? And that's okay. These people are not dumb. These people are not stupid. They're brain surgeons, right? They're brain surgeons and they have brain surgery in the morning. So they don't have time to mess with your crap that doesn't work. So we got to make sure that our crap works, that it's functional, that it's usable. And then we can even go further and we can make sure that we respect human experience and make the things that we make delightful experiences, right? The tools that we make, people spend a lot of time interacting with, right? And whether that time spent with the tools that we make, whether that time is pleasurable or not, whether it's delightful or not, whether it's a nice experience or a bad experience, determines whether they have a nice day or a bad day. And if they keep interacting with these tools, it's a nice week, a nice month, a nice life, right? So we have a responsibility to make sure that the things that we build respect human rights, human effort, human experience. That's the Ethical Design Manifesto. So we try to keep all of these things in mind as we're building things. So what are we building? I'm going to get to that. But maybe it's as important to cover what we are not building. So of course, after all of this, you'll know that we're not building a centralized system, right? We're not a surveillance capitalist. We're not people farmers. So that's not what we're doing. That's not our, that's not our goal. That's not our business model. So you might say, okay, you're not building a centralized system. You're not a Silicon Valley startup. Cool, get it. So you must be building something decentralized. So are you, about Web3? Is that what we're doing? Are we doing Web3? Are we doing blockchain? Oh gosh, blockchain, right? Are we doing metaverse stuff? Are we into NFTs? Are we gonna save the world with non-fungible tokens? Is that what we're doing? No, we're not doing any of this bullshit, right? What we're doing is probably best explained with Web Zero. In fact, there is a Web Zero manifesto as well. If you go to webzero.small-web.org, you'll see it there. So what is Web Zero? So what, it's not Web 3. What's Web 0? I thought we were done with Web 0, right? Aren't we at Web 5 now? I don't know, Jack, are we there? So Web 0 is very simple. You take Web 3, right? We all know what that is. So that's decentralization, of course, plus blockchain, plus NFTs, plus metaverse, and we just get rid of the bullshit, right? And we're left with just decentralization. So that's Web 0, as I see it, right? So it's Web3 without all the corporate right libertarian Silicon Valley bullshit, right? So all these Ponzi schemes and get rich quick schemes and all of that stuff. So that's, yeah, none of that. The other thing that we're not about is this whole thing that I keep seeing people saying, hey, privacy is dead and whatever, but some argue people should sell their own data. I'm sure some of you have heard about this, right? Yeah, we're just trying to make it so that you can benefit from selling your own data. We've got to take a few steps back there and kind of think, well, what is data, right? What is data about you? What is data about me? Data, as I see it, is something where if I have enough of it and I have the right algorithms, I begin to approach you in terms of having a very useful proxy of you, a simulation of you, right? So to simplify this even further, I could say that data about people is people, right? So, or at least begins to approach that. So what does it mean to own data? What does it mean to own all of this information about people, these simulations of people? We have to ask ourselves that question. And if we do start seeing data in this way, then what we're saying to people is, we're building things where you can sell yourself. This corporation isn't selling you, but you can sell yourself. I'm just not sure that's the right goal to have, So that's not what we're doing. That's not what we're about. And we are not blockchain oil salespeople, right? So that's not what we're about. We're not about those Ponzi schemes and pump and dump scams. No, we're not trying to make a quick buck here by creating our own cryptocurrency. And it's very sad to see that is sort of everywhere. So it's always refreshing to see projects where, they are working on decentralization, but they're not a cryptocurrency scam. They're not trying to just get rich quick by having their own cryptocurrency and getting a portion of the profits from that. And it's always very sad to see projects that were like that, get into bed with some of the worst people in the cryptocurrency world. I think if there's one thing I've learned working in this area for so long, it's never have heroes, because you will be disappointed. And that's just really sad. But also, if we're working in decentralization, then I think it's quite to be expected that we don't have heroes, that we don't put people on pedestals, that we don't raise up new kings to replace the old ones. I think that also just makes sense to me. So we're all, wow, now we know what you don't do. What are you working on? Okay, so what I've been working on for the last several years is building tools and infrastructure to enable what I call the small web. So what is a small web? It's actually a very, very simple concept. What if every one of us had their own place on the web? And what if we could use these places, these always-on nodes on the web, to communicate with each other, to be public if we wanted to be public, so that people could follow what we're doing, what we wanted to share, but to be private also. So having imagine a system where this already exists, right? So you can find me at aral.small-web.org. You can find, someone else at nina.othersmallweb.org, etc. But we can all communicate. Maybe if we're running the same apps, the same protocols, we can all communicate with each other. So you might be saying, Aral, well, that sounds like a peer-to-peer system. Why does it have to be a website? The whole idea behind a small web is, yes, of course, peer-to-peer is what we're going towards. But we have two issues, as I see them, in peer-to-peer, which aren't solved issues, which people are working hard on, which some things solve better, some things solve worse, but findability and availability. And a lot of peer-to-peer systems at some point fall back on some sort of a centralized node, either as a relay, either as a backup. We have this with WebRTC, we have this with signaling. So, if that's the case right now, and maybe it won't be the case in the future, maybe we'll, our data structures will finally fix this issue in the future because they'll be so robust or whatever, I don't know. But today it is an issue. So if we're going to fall back into anything, into a centralized server, why not have it be something that you own and control yourself, right? And it also really simplifies certain things. If you can be easily found through a URL, and if I can guarantee that at least one of your nodes is always available. So that's the whole idea behind a small web. How do we make it so easy for people to have their own places on the web? As easy as getting a Facebook site, your account on Facebook, right? That Facebook owns and Meta owns, of course, you don't. How do we make it as simple for you to own and control your own place on the web? So this, I said, I've been working for the last few years on tooling and infrastructure. A lot of it is kind of behind the scenes, because what we have to do in order to do this is to simplify the whole stack. So right now, we're working on developer tools, and using those developer tools, we and hopefully others will be building the everyday tools that everyday people use. And the one of those at the lower levels of the stack is a server, a web server, and a platform. I don't know, I hate that word, platform. It's a framework that is written in Node.js. And that choice was, again, for going as simple as possible across the stack in terms of JavaScript. And this came out of my own need, really, because I initially, for example, was building this web hosting solution for the small web that any organization can take and very quickly become a small web host, and I'm working on that. But I started working on that in SvelteKit at the time, because I was like, Svelte's so cool, ooh, oh, ah. And I kept hitting these barriers, because Svelte doesn't want to be used in a small web sort of way, because Svelte is big web, right? Svelte is big tech. Svelte is serverless, which of course is about, the people who own the servers having control. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna, actually go back another few steps and write my own kind of framework. Because also, if you can control all the bits of the stack, you can make things easier in terms of the experience going forward. So the whole idea is that eventually people will be able to go to a site and within a minute set up their own web presence that they own, at their own domain, and that they can move to any other domain and move around on their own virtual private server, etc. So kind of just their own little place. So working on this framework and a server integrated, again, the framework and the server integrated to make it simpler. No build process, none of this, Webpack or whatever, no bundling step. And how it works basically is as a developer, so this is again for developers, you adopt it first of all, you adopt the Kitten, and that's just a one-line command to install it. And if you don't want to do it like this, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's horrible, don't do it, just go onto the site and you can clone the repository and run the install script and look at it first and make sure that, we're not doing nefarious things. Then you feed it some code. So this is a page, this is a full page. This basically here, I'm creating a counter, and then I'm just exporting a root there that's returning HTML. And in the paragraph, it's just repeating that Kitten and the counter every time that root is loaded. So if you name this index.page and then you run Kitten, you will actually have that running, right? You don't need to do anything else. So let me demonstrate. And I don't know if you saw that bit in Discord when I was saying I just found 4 different bugs that I introduced probably in the last day as I was preparing my demo. So you're going to see that things might be a little different because I realize where the bug is, but I haven't had a chance to fix it. So let me show you a demonstration quickly of how that works. So on my current development machine, I actually have it installed. So at the very beginning, let's just do the most simplest thing, right? Let's pretend it's like 1993 or whatever. You just have like HTML, right? So I'm just going to echo hello world into an indexed HTML file, and I'm going to run kitten on it, right? So there we go, and there we go. Kitten is running. Don't worry about this password. You can read about what that is. You haven't hacked me. That's not something you can use against me right now. It's on my local machine. So Kitten is running. And if I then go into my web browser, and let me just go to localhost, I'll just see hello world, right? So I'm sure some of you are thinking right now, Aral, wow, that's amazing. You ran a static HTML file like it was 1993. Exactly. Any web server, I think, worth its salt should be able to do that as the minimum, right? And everything beyond that, and any framework should do that, right? Anything beyond that should be progressively enhanced on top of that. So that's the approach I've taken with Kitten. So what does that mean? Let's go back into terminal. And I'm going to, let's make another demo. Let's make a dynamic demo, right? Let's go into dynamic, and I'm just going to make a page this time. Now notice it's .page. This is one of the core things about Kitten. So the way it works, for those of you that know Node, is there are experimental ES module loaders. And so Kitten makes use of that a lot. So there are, remember, it's a web server to begin with. So if you put an HTML file there, it's going to serve it as an HTML file. If you put a JS file there, it's going to serve it as a JS file. You put a JPEG or a PNG or an SVG, you're going to just get that served, right? But what if you want backend code? What if you want backend files? You don't want those served. You want those to be interpreted by Kitten. And we use the extensions. So you can put them anywhere. You don't have any directory structure that's imposed on you or anything. It's the extension. And all it does right now is it just maps those to JavaScript files. So it's not even doing any fancy loading. I might in the future do a little bit of that in order to, inject a bit more syntactic sugar into stuff or whatever. Right now, I don't need to. What this also means is you get great tooling out of the box. So let me just show you how that works. So I'm just going to edit that file. And here I'm going to, instead of just HTML, I'm going to create a root like you shot. Let's actually recreate that example just very quickly. So let's say count equals 1, and then I'll export default, and I'll just make this an arrow function for now just to keep it brief. Now, here's one thing. Normally what I could do is, I don't even need the curly brackets. Let me just make this a little bit larger for you to see. I don't even need the curly brackets, actually. What I could do is, I could replace those curly brackets with parentheses and just return an HTML string like this. And here, let me grab a character to copy. Let's get this kitten. Let's copy that kitten over and paste it in there. Let me see if I'm on there. Paste it in there. And then I'll just say repeat count plus plus. I think that was the example. Now, normally, you will be able to do this. And of course, if you, unlike me, actually make that into a template substitution there. There we go. And normally this would work, right? Completely. In fact, I think right now it would work. Actually, you don't even need this here. Let's just make it like this. There we go. And we are. Is this an unterminated? No, I think this is Helix editor giving me an erroneous error message. Let's make sure. Yes. That's lovely, isn't it? Don't you love it when that happens? So, okay, this is a valid Kitten page. This will actually work. So if we, if I open up the browser again and I refresh, Oh, what I do need to do, of course, is to run Kitten. So let's just open up a different tab, and not there. Let's go to Wizard, Amigos, Dynamic. And let's make this a bit larger as well. There it is. There's our index page. So let's run Kitten there. Okay. And let's get back to the web browser and refresh. And there's our one kitten. Make it larger so you can see it. If I refresh 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 kittens. So it's a dynamic site. Okay. And I think, you know, you can already see that, yeah, there we go. Let me go to the other tab. That's all the code for that dynamic site, right? And actually, if I wanted to persist this, right? So what's going to happen here? Let me stop Kitten over here. And then let's go back into the browser. And actually, let me restart Kitten. It is running. Let's go back into the browser, and I'll refresh, and we're back to one kitten because it didn't persist it, right? It's just a global variable. So when the server restarts, that ends, that resets. So what if I want to persist it? Well, it has a JavaScript database built in. It's actually called JSDB JavaScript database, something that I wrote. So all we need to do really is here, I'm just going to say if, let's say db.kittens, let's just be lazy and say if not db.kittens, db.kittens equals count 1. Okay, so let's get rid of this. And here, instead of count ++, all I'm going to say is db.kittens.count. So ++. So there you go. That's all I needed to do, right? That's all the code that I need. So yes, that's correct. So I'm going to now go back to my browser, over here, and if I refresh here, you can see that it started from scratch initially because that latest version of the thing loaded. But if I go back to my terminal and I stop Kitten and restart Kitten, so you know that that's done, and we refresh, you can see that the count is kept. So it didn't start from 0. So that's now persisted. That's the database, right? If you want to know what's happening there, it's not magic. It is an in-process database. But if I'll open another window here and clear, let me just get the URL. So your database is here, your URL. That's a shortcut to the latest one. So I'm just going to copy that. And I'm just going to tail that database. What is it? Ooh, kitten database. All right, let's just, this might be one of the bugs that I introduced. Let's go here. Where is it? Where are we? Where are we? Wizard Amigos Dynamic. There we go. Oh, of course, sorry. Yeah, and then kittens .js or kitten.js, I think it was. Nope, kittens.js. There we go. So let's tail that and let's follow it. Go follow. All right. So now when let me get my browser up here and put it over there. So as I refresh, you're going to see that count going up, right? So what JSDB is, it's an append-only log, right? And it actually, the format that it writes in is JavaScript, not JSON. It's actually JavaScript. So it's really great for these sort of small web use cases. And if I were to restart this, it would compact that into an object, and then it would start again being an append-only log. So that should give you some idea of the simplicity of it. The last thing I want to show you before I go, because I'm going to be out of time as well, is how do you deploy with this? So let me get my terminal up here. And I'm going to, let me just open up a new terminal tab, clear. I'm going to SSH into a server that I provisioned just in the last hour. Don't do that with an operating system you've never used as well, just an hour before your demo. So this is running on Fedora. I've never actually used Fedora on a server. I'm running Fedora Silverblue right now. This is what I'm presenting from. But it, you know, they have peculiarities. Anyway, it's set up. There's nothing on here right now. So if I say kitten, there's nothing. So let me just take you through that process. Let's go to codeberg.org/kitten/app. This is where kitten lives, right? And I said there was a way to install it with a one-line command. So let me just paste that in there. Okay, it's installing it. It's cloned the repository, installing it. It's okay. So now I have kitten, right? If I say kitten help, make sure it's there. I can actually see that kitten is running. So I want to deploy something, right? Now, I showed you a very basic app. There's a chat app that I built for it. And you can find the source for that at codeberg.org/Aral, and then go to persisted Kitten Chat. Okay, so that's a bit more complicated, but you can see, you know, there's an index page there where I'm importing styles. There is a message component, .component. You can see it's .styles, .script, .component. You see how these things work. You can see that you can compose components. There's a status indicator, for example, etc. in there. And this is just a persisted chat using JSDB. Now I want to deploy this, right? So I built it and I want to now deploy it. What do? I get that HTTPS GET URL. I just copy it, right? And then I will go back to my editor, my console here. So I'm in my server. So I'm just going to say kitten deploy. I'm going to paste that URL. Okay, it's running. Now go there. So let me go to my web browser, and let's all go there right now. So it's show.js. I don't know what that is. Demo.smallweb.org. If you go there, so I'm the first one hitting it. I know that because it's taking a little longer. What it's doing is the reason it took a little longer is it's provisioning the TLS certificates for you. So again, I did nothing, right? So here's the kitten chat. So I'm going to say my nickname is Aral, and I'll say message hello. There we go. Make this a little smaller so if anyone else goes there. So just go there. That's live now. We've deployed, right? We just deployed a kitten app. So if you go there, you can see it. Anyone there? Anyone hitting demo.small-web.org? Say hello to me? No? Nobody's watching? All right, I've been told Alex is doing it, but he needs some time. Sure. So someone will be on there, and you'll see that it's working, and it's not magic. But so that's how simple it is right now for, of course, a developer, because I set that server up, right? The bit that I'm working on, the thing that I'm actually building with Kitten right now, so I'm building them both together, is called domain. And that's where you basically go and you'll be able to, anyone will be able to become a small web host. And then people can use that to, yes, works, but loads slow initially, jam, meow. I'll say, yay. You probably hit it at the same time that I did, so it was trying to get the TLS certificate at that point. Okay, great. So people are chatting, and you can see that that's been deployed. Okay, so to end, what I'm building with this, better stream to upload later. I'm not recording my stream, no, but you know, we can record it for later. I can do a recorded version of it as well. So the thing that I'm working on right now, if I bring my terminal back and I exit from this SSH session there, is called domain. And it is a Kitten app. Let me see if I'm running Kitten anywhere here, because you can only run one instance at a time. Yeah. So if I run Kitten there, you'll see domain running locally. So what is domain? So if I go to localhost and I make it smaller, this is what people will see. Smallweb.org. I want my own Kitten, for example. Say you are a developer right now, you want to set up Kitten, but you don't want to set up the server. At, I don't know, let's say Sarapath get that right? Yeah. .smallweb.org. Right now, it could be 10 euros a month from us. It could be tokens from a municipality. It could be a completely private instance where it's for your family and whatever, and there's no commerce involved. Get started, and that should be your own server in under a minute. That functionality has not been built yet. However, what I want to show you as the last thing is, here, let me get this password. Again, you can't hack me with that, it's local. But this is, if you're an organization, this is what you'll be using to set it up. So I'm trying to make it so easy for others to become hosts. So you basically set up your domain on the public suffix list, which is very important for security. And so basically small-web.org is on the public suffix list, which means that de facto, it is a top-level domain. That's how we can think about it now. But it's not a commercial top-level domain, which is really important. You set up a domain name service for setting up the subdomains. Initially, I'm supporting DN Simple. There's a VPS setup, so you have to get a Hetzner account and then set your API token. This is, again, for organizations, not the people who are going to be using this. This is for people who want to become small web hosts. And then it sets things up for you. You can set up a payment system, tokens, or Stripe currently. So that's the bit that I'm working on right now to get that working. And then people will be able to use that. Everyday people will be able to use that to set up not just Kitten, but things built with Kitten. So you saw that chat app, for example. Imagine anything built with Kitten being able to be deployed through here with that simple process. So that is what I am working on. And that is my talk. So if there are any questions, please feel free to ask. And thank you so much for having me.
Great, great, great. I was just now the last part. I was wondering if I set up this server.
Right.
If we would set up one for Wizard Amigos, for example, would we have to actually rent a server somewhere, or this could go through you? Is this a service that Small Web and Kitten?
So it depends on what you want to do. So if you just want to, for example, play with Kitten and have a place to deploy the apps that you're playing with, you could just get a domain off of smallweb.org initially, using it just like anyone else would. And your server would be set up for you. If you mean as Wizard Amigos to become a host, then that's where in the administration it guides you through signing up with initially Hetzner and DN Simple, and how to apply to Mozilla to have your domain on the public suffix list. So it guides you through that. And at that point, you basically are using your Hetzner account to set up the server. You're using DN Simple to set up and manage the DNS. That's what domain is doing for you behind the scenes. So then, you're basically up and running using these services. My goal for the future is starting with like supporting the ones that I am right now, and hopefully adding other ones, so that eventually we will kind of commoditize those as well. So it could be Hetzner, it could be somewhere else, etc. Does that make sense?
Yes. Wow. So you basically offer a service, but it's not all, of course, centralized running through you, but you partner up and you openly basically direct people to these partners.
Well, not only that, not only partners. If Wizard Amigos was running their own domain, let's say Wizard Amigos smallwebhost.org, that's a terrible domain, but let's say that's your domain, and you were providing this service there, you can take domain, install it there, you get a Hetzner account, a DN Simple account, you put your details in there, and then you're doing it. You're completely separate to us. You're running your own instance of domain. You're setting up people with their own websites yourself. So you're completely separate to us. And that's the whole idea. That's why I'm spending so much time right now doing that, because us just doing this is simple, right? That's no effort whatsoever. I'm trying to make it so simple for other people to become small web hosts. So we're just going to be one of hopefully many in the future. Initially, it'll probably be just us because people will be like, is it even going to work? Is anyone going to want to use it? But anyone who wants to can. And that has to be the way that it starts off, as I see it, so that we don't become a center, we don't have any lock-in ourselves.
I definitely, I mean, see big value in this because, it's always a fight for, like, who will be the biggest, who will rule them all. But it's a lot of small ones partnering up that can also be big, but usually they do the partnering up, but behind the scenes. So I like this kind of open approach. That is not kind of like pretending that everything is going through us. We will take care of you, and you're like a small child.
That's a
who doesn't need
centralized
to think
approach.
and do anything. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I mean, the biggest challenge, I think, for anyone who's trying to change the system, I mean, if that's what we wanted, I'd go work at Google, right? I'd work at wherever I'd have, a six-figure salary and stock options, or more. I mean, much more than that. That was 20 years ago. Anyone who wants to, I think, democratize things, devolve power, the decentralization, right, is about devolving power, devolving wealth, devolving, the control of a system, and thereby making it more resilient as well. So there's so many advantages to it beyond it being a good thing to do. But one of the biggest challenges there is how can you make the things you do scale without you scaling yourself or your own organization, right? And that's a different type of scale. Silicon Valley centralized systems scale vertically, right? They become bigger and bigger and bigger, and they become these centers. We scale horizontally. So maybe if there are 10 different small web hosts at some point, that's awesome. 100, that's even better. And all of those servers are actually on commodity hardware. So someone can sign up with you and then move somewhere else, because there is absolutely no lock-in. In fact, it encourages that. That's the interoperability part of it. So, and what doesn't happen in this system is nobody becomes a billionaire. And that's fine. That's how it should be. Nobody should be a billionaire. That's the problem, right? We have a system today where we're looking at these tumors and we're celebrating the cancer instead of saying, wow, there's a problem here. We need to actually, treat this disease. Yeah.
So that's interesting. So let's say maybe in the future, hopefully, of course, soon.
Can people hear your questions, by the way, on the stream? Sorry.
They should be able to hear the questions. I hope so.
Okay, so I don't need to repeat them. Okay.
No,
cool.
no.
Sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead, please.
So, right. So let's say maybe in the future there will be hundreds or maybe even thousands or as many as possible of those hosting providers, and everybody has them. And then you probably need to also build some sort of app, or many, that use. And probably people can reuse the apps, and maybe in the beginning they will probably make something like a chat, or maybe a business, not a business card, but like a profile page or a personal web page.
Could be anything, yeah.
Yeah, could be anything, but I'm wondering, once maybe people want to build some sort of supply network of collaborating together, working together, doing stuff, how would that look? Do you have already some sort of ideas for that part? Or are all the pieces in place already?
I have ideas for what I want to build using this. But again, I think it's very important that we kind of simplify the whole stack and we share every brick. There's you can build something and then you're the only person who knows how it works, or it's so proprietary in some ways, even if it's open source, people can't take the parts and make something with it. That's why I'm not doing that. That's why I'm like, okay, Kitten is this framework in the server, you can take it, you can use it. Domain is going to be that. The thing I really want to get to building which it's so hard when you're just building tools and you're building what is essentially infrastructure, because you can't use the stuff that Silicon Valley has built because they're built with their own success criteria, right? Even the frameworks, all of the code that's written is written with the success criteria of Silicon Valley. If you use a Facebook framework, all of their biases are in there. So sometimes it's a bit frustrating when you're like, I just want to build the thing I want to build on top of all of these things, but I have to build all of these things and nobody cares and it's fine. And I'm just going to quietly build these. So what I really want to build on top of this, of course, is a system where people can communicate publicly and privately with a shared protocol, but a system where we can be sure that there are always on nodes. So again, a lot of things are simplified, greatly simplified. You could, of course, layer a synchronization protocol that already exists. You could, of course, layer something like Hypercore on top of all of this. But like I said, I now have reservations about the whole project, unfortunately, because of the pairing with the cryptocurrency stuff. You could build some sort of a directed acyclic graph synchronization system on top of that. You could decide on the protocols, but you could also simplify some of those because you know that those nodes are always going to be there. So you can have a much more ephemeral protocol as well, perhaps, where you don't necessarily need to have the whole history, the chain. So there's so much you can do on top of that. I, of course, have ideas for what I want to build, but I very specifically don't want to limit it to that. That's why anyone can take Kitten and, not right now, of course, it's very buggy. You can still play with it, but I'm introducing bugs every day alongside features and fixing the bugs, of course. But it's very early and experimental. And what I'm building domain with Kitten. So I'm, going back and forth and going, what belongs in the app, what belongs in the framework, in the server. And so there are things like sessions that I want to pull out from the app into the server and stuff as I'm working on this. So it's odd because I've been working on this stuff for so long that it still feels like it's very early, but it is. And I think part of that has been the time spent understanding the problem domain, understanding where I could have an impact with the tiny little, almost non-existent resources that we have, and working on that and concentrating on it. But to answer your question, I know what I want to build with it, but the whole idea is that I want to also see what other people build with it, so that you're not just tied to whether or not the thing I make works.
Okay. Yeah. So
Does that answer the
there's
question?
one more also question from the audience, but I also have a
Sure.
follow-up question, but maybe I'll
Sure.
ask it and then I'll pass on so that you can maybe even get 2 questions or something.
Sure.
So you said like maybe then there would be the communication system, so people have this public communication, but I'm wondering if I want to, let's say, to create my own little indie business or something like that, and I want to maybe even work with others, and then basically we want to collaborate using this stack. So do we need some more things than the chat on top? How do we do that?
And the second question?
And I also pass on the microphone.
Well, before you get to that, let's take it one at a time, because I always forget the other questions. Because this one's a very simple one. Sure, you can build any functionality on top of it. The chat sample is literally that. It's like part of the tutorial in learning how to use Kitten, the one that you saw there. It just shows you that you can create WebSocket functionality, and that's what I didn't get into. Is I showed you very basic stuff you can do. It's meant to be progressively enhanced, so you can progressively enhance it using HTMX, which you should look into. It's a really cool system. I think it used to be called Intercooler.js or something. You can look at the source code for the persistent chat to see how, for example, a WebSocket is being declaratively used there. There's, I think, almost no client-side JavaScript. I think I might have used HyperScript there. People can build anything on top of it. It's not limited to chat, of course. That's just literally one of the first examples that I wrote as a tutorial. Next question, sorry.
Yes, I'm sitting close to the stream. Here? Yeah, so you can see me very well. Aral, you are a legend.
Looking on the slide so I can see you. I'm not a legend. Do not make me a legend. Don't make anyone a legend.
We met a decade
you.
ago in Brighton at Indie Web Camp, and I remember you. You are always pushing the boundaries of free web, open source, all this, licensing. Like seriously, legend is not the understatement, and I'm actually hoping that you will find your team of minions and open source community, because you are great at communicating, like your streaming setup, this is a quality work, but then a single person cannot do the marketing, communication, sales, outreach, business development, and actually the software development. So find your team of minions.
Well, again, I do not want minions. Peers, yes. Minions, no. So yeah, you're entirely right, of course. But you probably also know that throwing more people at a problem that's not well defined doesn't necessarily create a solution. I think we're at a point. I'm personally feeling like I'm at a point where we're going that very soon. I think it will benefit from that. Yeah, I think up until this point, we have worked with other groups. We did a project, for example, with the city of Ghent a few years ago on this very issue. I actually tried to create it there with a team. And one of the problems was, what we're doing is research and development, really. And one of the problems there was the funding was, of course, very short term, as these things are. And when the political will changed, the funding went away. And so immediately our team went away as well. So when you're smaller, one of the things that you can do is you have fewer costs and you can actually carry out research and development. So of course that's not forever. And I'm very confident that this is what I want to move forward with now, finally, with the structure. So yes, at some point it's going to be, and probably some point soon, it's going to be very good to finally be able to work with other people again. It's just a matter of when.
A quick follow-up.
I can see your lips moving, but I can't hear you.
Yes, can you hear me now? 1, 2,
I can hear you now.
Fantastic. I have one difference with you, and I would say this: do not let the differences in one matter affect 99%, which we agree. I am actually in the camp of global governance, climate change, and blockchain. That is one of these exponential technologies that can solve trust, transparency, and I am in the camp of blockchain is here to stay, and it can fix global governance, climate change, and of course there is loads of shady actors, pump and dump, Ponzi schemes. But at the end of the day, just like internet is here to stay, mobile phones are here to stay, and like it or not, blockchain is here to stay. And maybe we can have this conversation offline where we will just put our arguments for, arguments against. We will wait, we will just, I invite you to have the open mind.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to destroy all information about data structures, a certain data structure or two. No, of course, it's here to stay in that way. But also, when we're talking about blockchain, what are we talking about? What kind of proofs are we talking about? Are we talking about proof of work? Then you won't be able to change my mind because of the climate's repercussions of that. If we're talking about the political aspects, the kind of libertarian underpinnings, then I have my kind of thoughts on that subject as well. But also there's a lot in decentralization, so much, in fact, nearly all of it, topological decentralization, which does not require a blockchain. 99% of the time, from what I can see, blockchain is a solution looking for a problem. So again, we can have this conversation elsewhere, of course. People do, and probably every side of this has been hashed so many times. And I think I find it much more productive to just kind of build stuff. So, I'd say to you, let's have this conversation. You build stuff, I'll build stuff, and hopefully all that stuff will benefit the world. And then we can sit somewhere and have a beer and go, see, what I made does this and what I made does that, and that's great. So hopefully that's what we can do. I think that's much more
That's a good.
productive, and we won't waste time on going
That's a
back and forth on things. Does that make
That's a
sense?
great. That's a great point. Yeah. I was
Cool.
just thinking, like, one last thought.
Sure.
If I see this correctly, you're trying. I mean, you of course want to see peer-to-peer work, but you know that
Yes.
in order to have like truly decentralized peer-to-peer, we need everyone to run a server. So you're starting from this other side where it's like, hey, let's start with the server, and then once people are running their thing, then we can add all these protocols on top and so on, because otherwise we first do everything peer-to-peer, but then it's again some silos and I don't know, just couple of big server, like everything is then ran through Amazon or whatever.
That's it. That's it. And not like, first this, then that. People are, as you know, of course, because you're involved in it, people are building and improving peer-to-peer systems. I was very closely following the Hypercore project and DAT before that, of course. And I love that project. Used to really love it because it was just a directed acyclic graph. It had nothing to do with cryptocurrencies or anything. And I've been following how much stuff is developed there. So my idea is by the time that what I'm building is ready for use by everyday people, by the time it gets more successful, then there will be even better peer-to-peer solutions that we can, and protocols that we can, and data structures that we can layer on top. But yes, exactly as you said, if we have these things happening at the same time, and this structure starts getting built where people have their own nodes, where we can start relying on that, then it makes it easier on the peer-to-peer side as well. Did I answer your question, or did I?
Yes, totally. I'm just thinking, I mean, maybe we should wrap it up, but like, it's just like, every answer opens up a new inspiration.
course.
But I'm just thinking like, so your premise is that everyone will kind of run a node, but not necessarily by themselves. They will maybe have a small business, like in the old times of the internet where there were all these tons of hosting services. So in this sense that you're kind of like renting a server through some small provider.
Well,
Yeah.
You're always, to a degree, renting a server, unless like you own your own Raspberry Pi or whatever, and you can do that. So you can install it on a Raspberry Pi. I've got so many little computers around, just little tiny cubes and stuff, that's all you need in order to run one of these. So eventually, maybe that's something that we'll do as well. It's one of my plans, is to just have these little cubes that you can just buy and connect to your router at home. And that's how you have it, if you don't want to have it rented from a VPS somewhere. So the VPS approach is just because it's so much simpler right now, without all the logistics of shipping hardware and all of that. Yeah, so eventually this can be used in a multiple of ways. But what I'm trying to do, then the hardest part, is to make sure that these servers that are set up are self-maintaining, are under a minute to set up. And if you watch some of our Small is Beautiful streams on smalltech.org, in one of them, in the previous prototype, it was all functioning. So you can see how you just get the server set up in under a minute. So that's great for starting off, but then if people have to have technical knowledge to maintain it, then we failed there. So having the server be self-maintaining, that's why I'm using Fedora Silverblue, which uses a Git-like system for updating itself. And there are server versions of that as well. Hetzner doesn't have it, so that's why I'm not using that right now. But the goal is eventually to have the servers be self-updating, with the potential for automatic rollback if there are any issues. Kitten itself auto-updates. Anyway, it uses Git throughout. In fact, I haven't built this bit of it yet, but one of the coolest things is you will be able to just, so Kitten servers, so when I'm serving that chat, for example, Kitten will also have the source of that in Git on the same server. So if I go to a server where I see that chat app, for example, and I say, I want to run it, I just get the URL of that server, and then I go to a domain instance and I say, I want a copy of this, right? Or I want to just do it, run it locally. I just get that domain. So forget view source. We have the whole Git repository hosted with the app itself. And this way, it'll make it so much simpler for people to remix things, to just go to a site and say, actually, I want to run that too. And all you need is the URL of that site, and then you can run it. So I think it will open up a lot of possibilities once this system starts being built, once more people start having a place where they can do this sort of thing. So that's my whole goal, to make it as simple as possible. And that's the hardest bit. So that's what we're working on.
All right. Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that with us. So we're also having
Very
the next
welcome.
speaker slowly coming after that one.
Of course.
One thing that I was just thinking of, because you mentioned Hypercore, and that they, I mean, of course, we know that they are now using a hole punch and that they teamed up with, I think, Tether or blockchain, basically. But I think the Hypercore protocols as such are still a separate stack, and they're having like a very modular architecture, so it can probably be used without. They only
of course.
released it in December. There's another one. There's another one. Maybe if you have heard of them, they're called Socket Supply, and they just had a talk on
actually.
Node Conf. So Dominic Tarr is working in the team. And
Of course, I know Dominic.
yeah, and a bunch of others. For example, the founder of Nodejitsu back in the days, and they're doing something
cool.
similar. They just released it in a talk on Node.conf.eu, and they shared the link. I can also share the link with you. They're building something very similar, so maybe that's more viable, but I don't know.
Of course. I mean, the protocol is, the protocol is a protocol. Tech that already exists is a tech that already exists. But it doesn't stop me having a very bad taste in my mouth now because of it. And so I'm just like,
website sockets.sh. I think that's where you put down.
socket.sh, sure.
No, sockets, like in plural, .sh.
Okay.
But otherwise, thank you very much for this amazing talk.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and here's hoping I'll be able to make it in person one of these days and get to meet you guys.
We do one next year again.
Totally. I
right.
have to say that sadly we had like a bad bandwidth, so the video quality is not the best. But we're learning. Audio
It's
is
fine.
good, and we can do this.
It's fine.
Again,
Audio
when we're
is
back.
90% of video. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Thank you for the comment.
Great.
have
Take care
a
of
great-
yourselves and
have a great day, and really thank you for taking time to be with us.
you too. And thank you for organizing this, and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Yay.